Welcome to Turek Books Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Joshua Turek. We're never going to read all the books we want, but when someone tells us about a book, that's its own valid form of experiencing it. Our guests come in to talk about the books that left lasting marks on them as readers, and that becomes a springboard to who they are, who I am, and maybe who all of us are. So sit back, relax, and enjoy it. And who knows, maybe you'll end up grabbing a book or two. Maybe you've read some of them, and it's nice to hear someone else talk about them. We want this to be like a book club, but without the guilt. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Turek Books. I'm so excited for our guest today. He's the director of Dear White People in the upcoming docu-series Hollywood Black, Justin Simien.
What's up, man?
Hey, how you doing?
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
You exist in real life. This is so cool.
Yeah, I know.
I knew you from TikTok.
I know you from TikTok, and I just love what you have to say, and I reached out on a whim, and you were kind enough to respond and come on.
I love your
meet
content.
offline.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's weird because I don't think my TikTok is matches the building we're in right now. So it's who is this guy?
That's hilarious.
If it helps, I rode my bus and my bicycle to get here.
But that's the TikTok aesthetic, right? So
right.
It never matches the
true.
And
we were both surprised that the other one's as tall as he is.
Yes, this is a constant problem. People think I'm short. It's weird.
I cast a diminutive shadow in people's memory of me.
I know.
They always say, I didn't remember you being this tall. It's well, yeah, I'm not trying to dunk on you.
That is what they always say. It's so weird. I wonder what it means.
I think
it's a good thing.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think it's a sign of modesty.
Yes.
We're not abusing the height advantage.
It's right. And we could. So be thankful.
That's right. Yeah. So as far as reading goes, we talked a little bit. How's your reading life?
Oh man, I read a lot actually. Read/listen. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I think that's my constant actually when I'm in the car, when I'm doing my little gardening, because I'm in that class of millennials that just skip to grandma hobbies.
Yeah.
But I'm always I don't know. I've just always had this thirst for knowledge, and when I'm excited about something or curious about something, I kind of rabbit hole my way through a variety of books about it. And so I've always got something going in the car, in my headphones, and then I usually have something by my bedside. Very few of them are actually narratives, which is weird because I make primarily narrative, movies. But when I'm reading a book, I don't always really want a story. I actually want information
yeah. From someone who's thought long and hard about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
As opposed to the sort of synaptic snaps we're getting online.
Right, stuff you cannot get in a Google search or on Wikipedia, or there's actually, and especially as a queer man and a black man, there's a lot of texts that just didn't make the digital leap, that are not available online, are not being discussed in a Reddit. You can't get them on Audible usually. Sometimes some of these things you really got to dig for. So
right. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. Aside from just an intentional suppression, sometimes the budget's just not there to keep someone at the top of the Google search.
That's right. And especially if it's not part of the mainstream dominant society, white male patriarchal. If it is something different or from a different source, it's just lost to time. There used to be gay bookstores.
Yeah.
And they were a rite of passage for gay men. You'd have some of the salacious things there. But then you also had actual texts, people who were grappling with gay affirmative psychology, for instance, and things that are very specific to the gay community. Those books didn't make it to the digital bookstores. They're not available in your local Barnes and Noble. If you don't know to look for it on Amazon, you wouldn't know to look for it. People don't go to libraries anymore. So there's whole sections of knowledge that are just kind of gone.
Right.
Because they weren't convenient or they weren't popular enough or whatever it might be. So
yeah, they weren't mass products.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that the information wasn't vital.
Right.
And something that makes people, that brings more understanding into the world.
Right.
But
I didn't bring any of those books today, by the way. I just wanted to get on that soapbox.
They're too hard to find.
Yeah, every book I brought today is pretty easy.
Well, they're too precious.
Yeah.
Those don't leave the home
That's
if they're that hard to find.
That's right.
Yeah, it really is interesting, the like channels of information we get. And I think the mainstream of information, like you said, white, patriarchal, capitalist, imperialist, it's like it's not just like they're not just evil instruments, they're also kind of boring.
Yeah.
You know, the stories that are told about the United States or whatever, it's just boring too.
Yes.
Because you sense complexity in the world as you experience the world, and you sense diversity in the world. And then when you keep getting this like main channel of information, to buy into it is depressing to me.
Yeah, and I think it contributes to how depressed we are in general and how lonely we feel. I love the James Baldwin quote about when you think your pain is worse than all the pain in the world, you read. Because reading makes you realize that you really are not alone. And even some of the most novel and complicated feelings and experiences that we go through, there's probably been people who have been pondering these things and talking about these things for centuries upon centuries. And it is so, the feeling that you get when you see yourself in something from another time or another place or a person you've never heard of, there's really nothing quite like it. And it makes me really sad, because I think that like, if all you think that you are the things you can Google about yourself, and you don't have any exposure to anything outside of that, you don't really get to know how vast you are and how many possibilities there are to be in the world. And I think like, as a gay Black man, reading has helped me to sort of expand my sense of self, because what is being reflected back to me in the culture is usually pretty confining. And even if I can't quite say or sense where the wall is, I feel it.
Yes.
You know, and I really feel it when I'm reading something that I didn't know to read before. It's like there's an opening, like, okay, got it. I can feel this. I'm not insane. This feeling has a name.
Yes.
And people have been talking about this feeling, this very thing that I'm going through.
Yes. So, that's wonderful. I mean, what a great way of putting it. Yeah, just books being that bridge that allows us to get from one human's voice to another's. It's so impactful. It is telepathy.
It's human. Like, we actually have the ability to put our thoughts and feelings into other people's brains.
Wow. Yeah. And it's time travel. Too.
Yeah, it's time travel.
Their words are being found in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you talking about that makes me, and I've always wanted to research it more, but I actually haven't been able to find as many good books on it, like the burning of the Alexandria Library in Egypt. Oh,
sure. Yeah.
You know, and you just hear these like little bits of information that it housed some of the, like, just a vast amount of knowledge through the ages.
Yeah.
And then it, caught fire and burned. And in my mind, as they're like trying to limit what books can be read, down in Florida and all these throughout the country,
right?
It's like, you can see history repeating itself,
Absolutely.
but also, you just think, man, all the stories that haven't been told,
the stuff you don't know.
That's
the stuff. I mean, it's funny. Like, one of the books I brought today inspired this feeling a lot, because when I find out something I didn't know, but that was vital, should have been vital, I get so angry about it.
Yes.
Because usually it's lost to time. There are malicious people, and there are people like who are trying to ban certain kinds of information, that kind of thing. But some of it is just human incompetence.
Right.
We just didn't think to save that.
Right.
Or we didn't think that something was important. We didn't look over there. We were busy thinking about something else during whatever time period, was most crucial to save this text or that text. Or we've misunderstood something for ages. That's always interesting to me when they finally discover a new, scroll or something, and they realize, there's a whole chapter of this book that we've thought should have been enshrined in some, religious document forever, but actually there was a group of people who were thinking something totally different. That stuff, it happens all the time. Like, why do we feel so confident and sure
right
about our knowledge when it's just so fragile, actually?
Yeah, and there's just so much additional context to everything. Well, bringing up that book that you said kind of awoke that, I mean, it'd be good to just kind of get right into that.
This is also kind of like a shameless plug. But truthfully, this book has occupied me mentally, physically, in all ways for the past 4 years because I've been adapting it. It's called Hollywood Black. It is the latest book by Donald Bogle. And Donald Bogle is... he's the preeminent scholar for all. Oh, sorry, I should have.
No, yeah, hold it up. Let's.
Yeah, this is Hollywood Black.
It looks great.
The stars, the films, the filmmakers. Donald Bogle. So basically, Donald Bogle is the preeminent scholar of Black film history, which is really just film history. But here we are. He wrote this book for TCM. But he has written many books, and this one kind of like synthesizes a lot of the things that he pioneered and discovered. One of the big things about Donald Bogle is Dorothy Dandridge. We all know who Dorothy Dandridge is, but that was not true like 20 years ago. Nobody knew who she was at the beginning of the 90s. We know who she is because he wrote her biography and said, hey, we all forgot about this woman who played Carmen in the all-black musical, and that led to Halle Berry playing her eventually, and her now becoming sort of like ensconced in our memory of Black Hollywood. But she was one of those figures that was lost to time, and he's dedicated his life really to uncovering as many of those figures who were lost to time. This is a book that made me angry in the best way. I discovered it around 2020. I was reading another book of his. It's called Tom's, Coons, Bucks, Mammies, and Mulattoes. Okay. These are the names of all of the Black stereotypes that you see at the I mean, you still see them, frankly, but you certainly saw them at the beginning of cinema. And it was his way of sort of talking about the people behind those stereotypes, the actors that had to play these characters. And really was the first time I was able to look at some of those images from the past and have real compassion and love for the Black artists who kind of were toiling away underneath all of this racism and all of these stereotypes and kind of pushing and shoving at the edges of those stereotypes so that, one day I could get to make the movies that I make. None of that would have been possible if they weren't there, sort of like honestly taking on the bullshit, wearing blackface, being the mammy, being the butler yet again. And I don't know, I went to his book, to that book in particular in 2020, because at that time I was really successful in my career. I was finishing, 4 seasons of a show at Netflix, Dear White People. I had sold my second movie at Sundance for a pretty penny. And yet I was really unhappy. I was really, really fucking depressed, actually. I was more depressed than I'd ever been. And I just felt like there was an experience I was having as a Black filmmaker that was not like other filmmakers, and I couldn't quite name what it was. I didn't have the word, but I just felt so confined and constricted. I felt like I was working harder than my peers to get less. And I started to read this book, remember the people who came before me, and I reached out to him, and I reached out to Donald, and I was like, has anyone ever talked about adapting this into something? Because I'm loving what I'm reading. And he said, yeah, and it's kind of, the rights are taken. But I got this new book coming out, and it focuses not just on the actors, but also the directors. A light bulb went off in my head, and I began to sort of like uncover this history of Black filmmakers that also was never really taught to me in film school. In film school, I was told about Oscar Micheaux, who back there in the 1900s, yada, yada, blaxploitation, yada, yada, Spike Lee. That's the sum of Black film history. Right. But as I'm reading and uncovering these films, I'm like, wait, Ganja and Hess? There was Black horror happening in the 70s under the guise of blaxploitation? Wait, the LA Rebellion? Wait, all these other filmmakers that were in between Oscar Micheaux and Spike? Like, it made me realize, very specific to my situation as a Black director, like, oh, I too am walking in the steps of other people have kind of built for me, and the obstacles I'm facing are the ones that were established in the 1900s, and these are the people who have been dealing with them, and now I have a name for them. And now I have a legacy, and now I'm not just floating out here alone, feeling special because I'm the one, black gay that gets to make a movie this year. But like, I actually feel like, I'm in a legacy of people who have really built this industry on their backs and never get the credit. And I got angry in the best way from reading Hollywood Black.
In the best way, in that it spawned action?
Yeah, I mean, I think anger is really important, actually. I think anger is a really important fuel for creativity, especially the kind of work that I do, where I want to say something, I want to impact something, impart something. I want to challenge the status quo in some way, otherwise I'm not that excited to do it. And yeah, it made me angry that I didn't know about these films and filmmakers, and it made me passionate about letting other people know about them, and especially filmmakers that are coming up today. Black filmmakers primarily, but all filmmakers. I think, and I've made this point on TikTok before, like all the issues that anybody in Hollywood is facing right now, every single one of them, pay disparity, AI taking your jobs, company consolidation, all that kind of stuff, right? No one had to face those battles worse than Black people. And there's a specific reason, because of the country that Hollywood came up in, for that. But when you study that history, one, you realize that you're not alone, no matter who you are. And two, you realize that there have been some ingenious solutions to these problems, and that also spark new movements, new forms of creativity. Time and time again, it was oppressed Black people that saved and changed Hollywood. We have the talkies, really, because that was fueled by jazz music and jazz styles and Black, performances. A lot of the science fiction that comes out of the 60s is really informed by white people grappling with the so-called Negro problem, but in coded forms like King Kong or Planet of the Apes. It's always us. When the studio system collapsed at the end of the 60s, it was blaxploitation, so-called blaxploitation. But really what that was Black independent filmmaking that saved and revitalized Hollywood. It happens over and over again. And yet here I am feeling like an outsider. Fuck that. I'm not an outsider. You guys are the outsiders. You invaded my shit, It just changed my attitude about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I wanted everyone to feel that way.
Yeah. So fascinating. Yeah. So vital. And yeah, finding threads of history that have either been lost or suppressed, and awakening that is so huge.
Yeah.
I'm reading a lot of indigenous history specific to this continent. And one of the most important points that keeps getting made is like, it's not an act of generosity that we're still here. These are acts of repeated resistance. And sometimes resistance takes many different forms, but it is it is why we are where we are.
Yes.
And it's why we still exist. And listening to you talk about Black filmmaking and talking about, actors having to compromise, themselves for the racism of the time. It's like, and how that kind of turned in you, where you're like, no, they were doing what they had to do. It was like, that was resistance. Yes. Like you were saying, they were pushing, staying in the game under all these layers of oppression to eventually, bring it to where you are and where hopefully it can go.
I love how you put that resistance.
Yeah, resistance, right? That
is what it is. It's they Trojan horsed a lot of resistance. One of the TikToks I made that I didn't think anybody would care about. It was the biggest one I made. Was about like linking Burt Williams, who's the first Black superstar, who even Black people really don't fuck with Burt Williams because all the images of him are in blackface. And you see a man in blackface and you go, oh, how sad, poor guy, or you're angry, or thank God we don't have to do that anymore. But what you're missing from just those images, and what you can only find out by reading about Burt Williams, is that actually, like, he was a comic genius, and he sort of accepted blackface because otherwise he wouldn't be able to perform. He was a light-skinned guy. And back then, light-skinned Black people could not show up as themselves on stage. They had to be in cork. That was just one of the requirements of the society around them. But Burt took that And he took everyone's assumptions that he was going to be the slow, dim-witted country bumpkin, and he always found a way to make his character the smartest one on stage. And he was the funniest one. All of the, W.C. Fields, Charlie Chaplin, all those early vaudeville turned movie stars, they studied Burt Williams. He was known as the funniest man in America in the 1900s. And when you look at animation, and particularly the Bugs Bunny, the Daffy Duck, the sort of like, lowly forest creature that's actually really funny and wise, that have the servant's gloves and are usually all black except for their lips, if you really think about it. All those cartoon characters are minstrels. They're animated forms of a kind of comedy that Burt Williams perfected in the 1900s. And you can see the lineage all the way up to Homer Simpson, all the way up to Rick and Morty. It's a comedic style.
That's right.
of being the underdog, but still being smarter than everybody else and figuring out how to get one over. That's a thing that no one knows. We owe this to someone's act of resistance.
Yes.
In the face of so much oppression. And even as we look at him, we can't even tell that he has something to do with all of this. But yet it was people like that.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
that's so vital. Such cool. My wife's like been watching The Office on her phone when she's cooking, or she just likes having noise. And I overhear it. I never watched the show, but I overhear it, and I'm like, "Oh, did you ever watch it?"
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm like, Jim to Dwight is Bugs Bunny to Elmer Fudd.
100%.
Yeah, I said that to her like a couple weeks ago, and then we like traced that back. There's Burt Williams.
So true.
That one step ahead of
so
the angry, slightly dumber guy.
And that's brilliant. That Elmer Fudd Bugs Bunny dynamic, that is straight from vaudeville. I mean, come on. It's straight from vaudeville. And if you can't see that the cartoon character wearing white servant's gloves, it has a lineage all the way back to the other kinds of characters that be wearing those white servant's gloves like that on stage. It's so clearly black. I'm sorry. It's so clear to me. And the kind of folks who would say that kind of thing out loud probably didn't write it down back then, and so it's up to people like Donald Bogle to kind of look backwards and like find the clues and help us figure out like how we got here.
Yeah. And so this is, you said 4 years ago, you found yourself sort of at the top of the sort of Hollywood game, but weren't feeling good spiritually, mentally, emotionally.
Not loving the hoops.
Was this project, did it allow you to sort of integrate it into a little more like creative, like synchronicity? Like
it did.
Synchronizing, all those sort of elements.
This project was not mine in the sense that like, this is not like a work of like, I love when people call me an auteur. It's a very flattering title, but the truth is trying to get any documentary made, and especially a docu-series made in 4 years, it's really not financially or physically possible for most people, myself included. It takes a team. This was something that came together so organically. I never planned it, never wrote down like, I'm gonna make a documentary. It wasn't like that. I was reading this and I was fascinated. I was being fed by it. So I was talking about it a lot. I was, thinking about, maybe I need a podcast just to like to have more conversations about this. And then I ran into my friend Jeffrey Schwartz, who's a great documentary filmmaker. He made a movie called Vito. He made the Tab Hunter documentary. He kind of specializes in like gay history, and he was like, have you ever thought about like, he's always trying to get people to make documentaries, like that's like his kink. And he was like, have you ever thought about making a documentary about this stuff? Because I'm fascinated by it, but he's a white guy. He's like, it would be weird if I did it, but like, if I could support you in doing it, that'd be great. And I was like, absolutely, that sounds really fun. And I had a deal at Lionsgate at the time, and so we set it up. Great. Well, that deal went away, and then the pandemic hit, and all of it fell apart. But then there was this other group. There was Forrest Whitaker's company. He wanted to do it. He had a deal at Starz, so we joined with them. Then Starz went away, and eventually this project basically died 3 or 4 times before we ended up at MGM Plus, and with a company called Radical doing the producing. So this was a really gradual thing, and it was a TV show, which meant that like I had a showrunner in New York, and I had story editors in New York and all over the country. And this was really something that was like a massive undertaking to put this into a docu-series. This was not just like me with a camera and a vision.
Right.
And it just felt like I am a custodian here. I am a midwife. Like, this is something that should have existed. When I went to go look for a Black documentary, about Black filmmakers, there wasn't much. I don't think there was anything, actually. There were like segments from other documentaries I could find on YouTube. Elvis Mitchell put one out about blaxploitation, but something comprehensive, no, I didn't find that. So to me, this was an act of service. It really was. This was not an act of ambition. Certainly didn't make me any money. You know what I mean? This was about like, this should just exist. And I'm honored that the swirl of people that I ended up around helped me get this thing made.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, and through your other acts of ambition, you were put into a position where you could be of even more service.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is kind of fascinating.
And it's been wonderful. And it's really been wonderful showing it and hearing from. My favorite thing to hear when people watch the piece is, "Oh, I got to go home and write," or "Oh, I got to make a movie."
Okay.
That's the best.
Yeah.
Because that's what we need. We are entering a very strange era, and we're going to need people's voices out there.
Yeah. Not only are we entering it, we're here.
Yeah. Well, what am I talking about? We are absolutely here.
No, it says nice. Entering is more of a verb, It feels like we're still can actively.
Listen, there are still some things I'm waiting to see how they shake out in a few months.
But ultimately, storytelling is what's going to allow us to imagine a better world. And the more people who do that, and the more people who have that fire lit that they can do it, like that's what we need. And the technologies are now available to make it a little simpler. Yeah. You could make your own TikTok, YouTube, whatever, independent film. I just self-published a book. It's like the options to getting your work out there have never really been more vast. And while those channels remain.
Well, that's right. But speaking specifically about cinema, and I consider TikTok cinema really is the greatest form of propaganda we've come up with. And I don't mean propaganda in a negative way. I mean, it is a direct line to people's hearts and minds. And this is another thing I discovered reading Donald Bogle. We had living proof of that with the film Birth of a Nation, which is usually taught as, the beginning of feature filmmaking in America. And maybe it is for a variety of reasons. But the thing that I find notable about that movie, and it's not a good movie, is that it was so popular that it inspired something called the Red Summer, which was nationwide massacres of Black people indiscriminately across the country. The membership of the KKK had all but dwindled before this movie came out. It went to several million people joined as a result of this movie. So it was undeniable that cinema, for ill or good, can really move the people.
Right.
And and the plus side to that is it made someone like Oscar Michaud say, you know what, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make my movie. And he started the first Black independent, movie scene with his movie Within Our Gates. He basically wrested that power back to his political ambitions and to his aims. His aim was liberation of Black people. So, he was able to use cinema in probably one of the most nightmarish apocalyptic times in this nation's history for Black people post-slavery. And he brought us to the place we're at now, where I can sit across from you and even talk about this stuff, So that's how powerful cinema is.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important. Like, don't wait. Like, get out there, make your movie, make your TikTok, put your stuff out there.
Yeah.
People need it. I'm going to need it. We're going to need it.
Yeah. But really, it starts with books. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Well, it does for me, but yeah.
As you were saying that, I was thinking of the most middling example, which is that I used to live in Echo Park by the market that was in a Fast and the Furious movie. And anytime a new Fast and the Furious movie would come out, which there are many, people would drive their souped up vehicles and go do wheelies in front of this market.
It's the power of cinema.
The power of cinema, which is just my stupid brain goes to like the most stupid
but
example.
It's so real though.
But to buy a car, to fix it up, to make it your weekend activity, to then go find the sites that you saw in the movie. It's like, that has become real life.
Yeah.
That was brought directly out of that screen.
You would see stuff in movies, back in the day. It'd be the first time you ever saw a woman in New York, because you just couldn't, we weren't as international and as connected as we've always been. And then all of a sudden a makeup craze that begins because somebody ran out of eyeliner or something weird happened or the actress was crazy. Who knows? Ended up in a silent film, and now it's a craze. Yeah, movies are cinema, movies, but any kind of mass media is really, really powerful, and everyone can put their hands on it in America anyway.
I saw this old footage on TikTok of like Paris, France in 1904 or whatever, black and white, and these people saw that the camera was aimed at them, and the way that they were behaving, like the way they're holding their hands, the way they're angled, you don't see anymore. And it led me to believe that we actually behave like the characters we see in movies and TV. Absolutely. Our poses, our affects, our way of speech, like people behaved in a different rhythm. Yeah. Which is so interesting.
People, I think, it's not natural to assume, it's not natural to walk around thinking about how you look.
Right.
That's not a normal thing. Unless you were part of some kind of aristocracy or something, and you happened to be surrounded by mirrors in a court or something like that but the phenomenon of knowing how you looked is new to us. So you're absolutely right. Everything we do is informed by how we're going to look in pictures and in video.
Right.
And like you said, the way we walk, our eating, our diets, our hair, our everything. So yeah, I bet it was pretty. I bet people were like, "Oh, that's what people were."
Yeah,
I bet that was wild.
Wild, yeah. All right, well, this is fascinating. And when does your docu-series come out? Because I feel like we should touch on that before we move on.
August 11th, it's going to hit MGM Plus. MGM Plus is a part of Amazon. So if you have Amazon, I think you'll be able to watch the first episode for free. But it's like a channel within Amazon.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so that's Hollywood Black.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you for sharing that. And hearing your genesis of it all, and you're now, like you said, you're shepherding it, right?
Yeah.
Through with the help of a team, but you're helping bring history.
That's right. And
untold history.
I hope it gets people actually reading, because you can't cover it in a docu-series, not all of it. So yeah, we point a lot of arrows to a lot of other people's work, a lot of scholars, a lot of filmmakers. So yeah, definitely check it out.
Super, super vital.
Now, these are some pretty lengthy books.
Are they? Yeah.
Obviously.
Right.
But I'm a big self-helper. I think I was maybe 35, 36 when I realized I had ADHD and depression. So everything up until then, was me in a self-help book trying to figure it out.
Okay.
And here I brought a couple that have been pretty crucial to me as an artist. The first one is The War of Art. It's a play on the art of war. It's a book by Steven Pressfield. It doesn't seem like much. The chapters are actually pretty short and pretty pithy, but it's all about resistance. It's all about, why is it that when you decide you really want to do something in your life, for me, this was write a screenplay. This book helped me get through the drafts after drafts of Dear White People to get that book made in the midst of undiagnosed depression, anxiety, and being broke and shit. This book explained to me, why was it that even though I was passionate and I knew what I wanted to do in life, when I sat down to write, I just immediately got back up and did something else, or wrote a little bit and then procrastinated, or like how to get out of that. I'm in a 9 to 5 and I'm exhausted. 9 to 5, that's generous. 9 to 9, I had a day job. How do I overcome the exhaustion and the confusion and the existential despair of having to participate in capitalism and actually get my butt to write and to do what I knew I was here to do? This book really helped me do that. Steven Pressfield is just a master of prose. He says things as simply and as succinctly as he can. But the length of this book, don't let it fool you. This is one of the richest. I read this book over and over and over again because there's so much in each chapter.
And so was there one particular hook in it that sticks out, or a series of hooks that kind of got you into that chair and got you, pounding the keyboard or writing with your pen or whatever you were?
Let me see if I can find, because it's just so good. Okay, I'll read this. Resistance is invisible. Resistance cannot be seen, touched, heard, or smelled, but it can be felt. We experience it as an energy field radiating from a work in potential. It's a repelling force. It's negative. Its aim is to shove us away, distract us, prevent us from doing our work. And I read that and I said, I'm aware. I'm familiar. Then it goes on to say that resistance is internal. Resistance seems to come from outside of ourselves. We locate it in spouses, jobs, bosses, kids, peripheral opponents, as Pat Riley used to say when he coached the LA Lakers. Resistance is not a peripheral opponent. Resistance arises from within. It is self-generated and self-perpetuated. Resistance is the enemy within. So this is really before and I love psychology. Like I read a lot of psychology and I go to a lot, I participate in a lot of therapy. But he's talking about, the inner saboteur. He's talking about your shadow self. He's talking about really deep psychological concepts. But without you having to know any of that, he just he names your problem and he walks you through what to do about it. And this became my sort of foundation to figure out how do I build a life out of my art and my creativity? How do I create the structure that I need, to achieve what I'm trying to do?
And confront those unconscious sort of things that are truly happening that he's just labeling resistance.
Right.
Which is even hearing you read it, I'm like, damn, okay.
It's so good.
So it isn't inside, the killer is inside the house, right?
Well, he gets you right at that point where you're like, he got me at that point where I was blaming everything and everyone.
Yeah.
And it was all of their fault. It really was.
Truly.
However, he let me know that in the middle of, if it's everyone else's fault and if it's always on the outside, then there's nothing I can do about it. But if it's inside, there's something I can do about it.
Right.
He made it like a hopeful thought.
Right.
And then he sort of starts to introduce you to what I think of as the characters in your head. I love this thing. I love IFS. I don't know if you know this. This is Eternal Family Systems. It's a kind of therapy. But the whole point of it is that you're not a mono mind. You're not one person. Inside of your head is a lot of different people, actually. Some of them are from your childhood. Some of them, we don't know where they're from. Actually, you were born with them, and that's weird. But they're all different people. And resistance is a person in your head. Mm. And then he starts to introduce you to, well, this is your muse. This is your creativity, who is flighty. You can't always depend on her. And then this is this other person. This is the you that you're building up that actually has the discipline to sit down, hear your resistance, wait for your muse, and write anyway. And he just sort of made that all very normal, very doable,
right,
and very approachable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you got to know the characters in your head through this book, and you found ways of putting them to work or to play.
Yes, right, because you can't really get rid of them. So it's about sort of accepting, I have every single day. I'm going to wake up for the rest of my life. There's going to be a voice in my head that says, stay in bed. Okay. So that's the first thing you got to accept. And then once you accept that that person's not going anywhere, you get on with what you got to do. And sometimes I can't do anything but just remember to read this book again.
Nice.
You know what I mean? Because I face it every day. I'm not a master at it. I have not overcome it at all.
Yeah, so the book is a creative anchor.
Yes, it is.
It's where to go find your reset.
When I'm like, I know what I want to make, but I don't really know where to start at all, and I'm scared to do the research, and I'm scared. Is it a movie? Is it a show? I don't know. I'll read this book. And
like you said, he condensed a bunch of complex ideas into sort of more palatable language.
Yeah, and he just tells you the truth in plain English, and it's so refreshing. And again, because it's so pithy, it's just sometimes a chapter is just a paragraph. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Resistance and being a star. I love this one. Grandiose fantasies are a symptom of resistance. They're the sign of the amateur. The professional has learned that success, like happiness, comes as a byproduct of work. The professional concentrates on the work and allows rewards to come or not come, whatever they like. Do you understand how long it takes to learn something like that?
Yes.
And here it is in 2 sentences on page 43, and that's the chapter. I'm sorry. It's just there's no barrier to entry with this book.
Yeah.
And it's a world of really wonderful insight.
Even bringing those two ideas together, because everyone's do the work. You got to do the work, but it's no one kind of links that to hey, your delusions of grandeur. Yeah, those are meant to keep you from doing the work.
That's right.
Yeah.
He's talking about fantasy, and you can't avoid it. Like, I mean, I'm a filmmaker. Obviously, some part of me wants to show everybody something.
One of the characters in you.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to show off something. But then when I have that thought of like, awards or when inevitably I feel like that, it's just a reminder like, okay, I feel this way, but I don't take it too seriously. Like, don't take it all the way, to an extreme, because that is just another way that you're resisting doing the work. And boy, is that true.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what's there to add to that? It's spot on.
Let me find one more thing. Let me just read one more little.
Yeah, let's do another one.
Okay, I'll read this one. This is a good way to end this book. He says, "There's no mystery to turning pro. It's a decision brought about by an act of will. We make up our mind to view ourselves as pros, and we do it. Simple as that."
Okay.
I framed this next to my computer.
That very line.
To write Dear White People. Like, yeah. Stop making it hard. Just sit your ass down. Clock in. Do the 2 or 3 hours you said you were going to do. If nothing comes, oh well. Do it. Yeah. You want to be a pro? You want to stop working your 9 to 7 or whatever and actually make movies for a living? Then sit. Isn't
it kind of wonderful hearing you say that like only writing taught you how to write?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Oh my God, it's so true. It's so true.
It's like what a generous continuance that writing becomes if looked at that way.
It's so true.
You're like, yeah, the only way I sat my ass down to write was by someone else sitting their ass down to write and telling me about it.
I got to sit down to write.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you have to do.
So profound.
Yeah.
And so simple.
It is.
Yeah.
He's a great author, and he definitely prepped me for a lifetime of self-discovery and figuring out like my interest in what makes the brain tick. Not just to like kind of optimize myself, but as a journey into myself, which of course informs my writing. It informs the kind of stories I want to tell.
Yeah.
And I'm still reading this book from every day.
That's
Not
amazing.
every day, but often.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's one of these books that people, if you're a creative, people recommend it to you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just like never found it.
Yeah.
It never showed up right in front of me until right now.
Oh, you can keep this copy.
No, come on.
I have so many copies of this book. It's a gift to you.
Really?
Absolutely. I buy copies of this book to give to people.
No way.
I love it.
I will accept your gift.
Absolutely,
because
man.
it finally landed in front of me.
It's just a delight. His writing is also real good. He's just a nice. I like his voice.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, like you and I were saying, we haven't entered this weird age. We're in a weird age.
Yeah.
Weird is a generous word for it.
Very generous.
Yeah, in a destructive age.
Disorienting.
Yeah. And I find myself swept away by it all the time.
Right.
Whether I'm involved actively or largely passively, staring through windows at other people's suffering or the suffering that may come any moment in whatever direction at whichever scale. And yeah, it's easy to sort of meet that with either despair, panic, or even a certain cynicism toward creation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But it's actually creation that is like the counterforce to that.
Yes.
And you kind of talking about the resistance is an inside job through this book is it lands with me.
Yeah, it's great, man. Enjoy it.
Cool.
Enjoy it.
Thank you.
Should I talk about this last one here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Also, pretty lengthy. I like these pithy books written by brilliant people. This is called Inner Gold. It's by Robert A. Johnson. Understanding Psychological Projection. Okay, so a couple things about this guy. He wrote books his most popular books are called He and She. It's sort of like, I think it's meant to sort of like the heterosexual married couple kind of figure out why psychologically you're different from each other and what you need in a romantic relationship or other kinds of relationships, being a man or woman. And those books are brilliant and they're great and I can't recommend them enough. But what he's really doing is he's introducing everybody to Jungian concepts. This is a Jungian psychologist, brilliant man. And he made a very active choice to, instead of try to explain to you and convince you of all of this dense, Jungian texts are so dense, they're so hard to decipher half the time. He just kind of boils it all down to the most pithiest, specific things about this one aspect of it that kind of opens the door for everything else. This book called Inner Gold, it's one of my apps. This is another book that I read over and over again. I found this book at a similar time that I found Hollywood Black. This was after 2020. And I won't go into a ton of details, but I think it's really difficult. I think it's near impossible to like be in Hollywood and not to find yourself sort of orbiting a guru or several gurus. And when I use the word guru, I don't necessarily mean a spiritual guru, although in this case, I might mean a spiritual guru, but I'm talking about like these sort of great charismatic people who, you know, have us all kind of in their thrall. They're just delicious to be around. They're inspiring. They pump us up. They, they look great on camera. They sound great. But as you kind of orbit them and get to know them, you realize that you're in a bit of a spiral and that you might be dealing with, I don't know, maybe this is a narcissistic personality disorder. This is maybe a sociopathic situation. I think a lot of folks in Hollywood have this experience where someone seems just too good to be true. And a year in, you find yourself in a very one-way kind of relationship, you know? And by 2020, I, had broken in at this point. I've been in Hollywood for 7 years. I found myself in more than a few of those kinds of relationships. Mm-hmm. And they were weighing very heavily on me at this time. And this book really was kind of like the doorway out of it. He sort of starts to explain something called psychological projection. And we all kind of know this term like, oh, I'm projecting onto you or you're projecting onto me. And I think we kind of have a colloquial understanding of it. This goes a lot deeper. His argument is that the people that you are obsessed with, your heroes, your icons, you are also projecting onto them. That's your gold that you're projecting onto these great people. Take it back. Because it's yours. And as inspiring as these people are, and as, and you can apply this to anything, to institutions, to jobs, to, I finally got into Harvard, or I finally made a Hollywood movie, or whatever. When that person hurts you, when that person isn't who you thought they were, when the situation changes, when it all goes to shit, you still get to keep your gold. That's yourself that you saw onto that person. And you can't sort of, maybe in this point in your life, fully own your greatness. But just by fact that you saw it in somebody else tells you that like you have the capacity to own that greatness. And in these few little pages, he broke that down for me and started to give me ideas and concepts to sort of take my gold back from certain folks or situations that I had given away quite a bit of it to.
And that's how he puts it, taking your gold back.
Taking your gold back, yeah.
Like that movie star, whoever it may be in your life, institution, whatever, that is a symbol in your mind made manifest, mm-hmm. and it allows you to see it.
Yes.
Because you can't see yourself.
Right.
And then he's encouraging you to see yourself.
And it's applicable to everything. It's particularly applicable in romantic relationships. When things are going great, when things aren't going great, to remember that like, wow, for you, like your wife is a projection of your inner anima, which is a Jungian concept for like, the inner female within a man.
Right.
As a gay man, I have something called a gay double, which I see in my husband. But never get totally confused and think that like that person's job is to embody this ideal that you are projecting onto them. That is your business, sir or ma'am. You know what I mean? Like this grand ideal, like, if they can't live up to it, we get very disappointed in our spouses or our partners, hopefully not narcissistic, abusive spiral relationships, but maybe, child. But whatever that is, like, that is your business. And it's actually a joy to realize that that's your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that, like, you don't need someone else's sun to shine on you and then be taken away and have you shivering. It's like,
right.
This is all you. And yeah, we're a Jungian household ourselves.
Oh,
so,
great.
Yeah,
so you know all this shit.
Yeah, not all this shit. No, like even hearing that's your gold and that way of putting it. No, I mean, there's, like you said, there's so much complexity.
So many ways to put it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've read, my wife actually was taking a class, so she read it to me, A Man and His Symbols. And and then I went and I read it after her. We were on a road trip and she needed to study, so she was reading it out loud through the Arizona desert.
Nice.
And then, I have Memories, Dreams, and Reflections on my shelf, and I've gotten like a quarter of the way into it.
Yeah, that one that's a dense book.
A dense book. And I mean, Man and His Symbols is probably the most approachable.
Yes.
But yeah, like you said, to have someone who can go in and extract the things that common folk will understand is so helpful.
It's true because he's not... the thing about Jung is that he was this great genius who was able to articulate all these concepts. But Robert Johnson is a psychologist. He's dealing with clients and patients, and he's a Jungian therapist, so he's trying to figure out how to take these really big ideas and make them usable for his clients. Yeah. And I think that's why his work it's so incredibly approachable. And I can't tell you how many times and I still have to read this book, but like I had to read this book over and over again just to get it, just to like not get it, but accept it and remember it. I think in Hollywood especially, you were just constantly indoctrinated into thinking that person has everything you need, or that opportunity, or that award, or that budget level, or that whatever symbol of you've made, that cover, that interview, whatever it is, the body, the suit, we are just constantly indoctrinated to thinking that like our gold is not in us. And I think that capitalism, that's the whole scheme of capitalism, is you make the worker think that their value comes from you and not from the work that they're doing. That's the whole point. But when you're in an artistic industry, that then starts to creep into your soul, because I bring my soul to my work. I bring everything I am to what I do. And so if you're indoctrinating me into thinking that it's actually not me, that it's you that has the key, boy, you've really fucked me up, And I think I don't judge too much when I see a celebrity go nuts, because like this system is not designed to like make you more sane.
Right.
That's for sure.
Right.
And I realized reading this many times, like I am really indoctrinated.
Interesting.
Just to my core.
What an honest reflection you had. I mean, you saying that, it makes me think of Hollywood. To me, is largely an imperial propaganda machine.
Oh my God, absolutely.
And the military, feel good stuff and all the rest of it. But the idea that it like Russian nesting dolls down to even the starter kit, which is just the artists who come here with stars in our eyes.
Oh, it does the number on us worse than anyone else.
Yeah, and so it's in our individual lives. So then we're primed to then attempt to climb its ladders because we're behaving like it wants us to.
Yes, we are.
And Hollywood just being a small example of the larger capitalistic sort of reality that we're all living in.
That's right.
Hollywood is an indifferent part of it. It's not like there's like people, making this manifest. They are, but they're just sort of cogs in it.
Yeah, a lot of it is unconscious.
Yeah,
a lot of it is really unconscious.
Well, and the unconscious thing is the fascinating part with Jung.
It is.
And like kind of when you dial into that and going, oh yeah, my behavior is totally inverted to how I actually feel about something.
Yeah, and also the collective unconscious. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Jung proved that there's a collective unconscious. However we define how it operates, that's up to you. But there's like a lot of evidence that there is something that we all tap into that is shared between us. It's unconscious. And what's wild is that Hollywood is interacting with that collective unconscious more than any other kind of force, because when a movie is really big, especially if you don't like it or you don't get why it's so big, it's usually because it's tapped into a collective unconscious feeling, and that movie was able to articulate that feeling in a way and at the right time that people sort of went nuts for it. So we are actually, like anyone who makes a movie, whether you care about that or not, or whether you think that you're doing something for all mankind or you're just trying to make a buck or whatever your reasons are, you are absolutely feeding into the collective conscious and unconscious of the human race. Sorry, full stop. And so it's really toxic that such an important role for a group of artists and a group of people is managed in this toxic, unconscious way. And so this was, we started the conversation talking about these oppressed people Trojan horsing resistance into their art. I think these two books helped me figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Because if I'm in a situation And by the way, we are all told that the director is at the top of the totem pole for a reason. They are absolutely not. And so when you're in that situation and you're the director, but you are being managed by these other forces, even if that doesn't change what you can do, just remembering that your gold, for instance, is the reason everyone's here, and it's you. It's not them. And they aren't like they're not being kind by letting you in. Like, you're being generous by letting them use your creativity at the shitty rate that they're paying you. You know, when you just have that information inside, it helps you survive. Sometimes it can even help you thrive. But I think it's pretty essential. If you're going to labor in this industry and think of yourself as an artist, I think that you want to change stuff and resist, you're going to have to build up some internal fortitude. And literally every book I brought today has helped me do that in some way.
Well, and in confronting any industry, wherever you may be.
This is applicable to every, absolutely.
And it's just so fascinating, the 3 books you brought in, because it just seems like reading integrates itself into your everything, your behavior, the way you look at the world, the way you look at your work life, the way you look at your identity, and then motivating your own behaviors. Seems like it's come from your reading life, which is like so cool as a reading junkie, a book junkie, to see that, like, wow, you're really shining, and you've used, these books have been companions to your self-growth that you're actively involved in, but you're actively finding resources to do that. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely. I don't know how else to do it. I just sort of like, when things are really shitty, it's hard for me to just sort of sit on my hands and be like, okay, I guess nothing I can do. And reading has been one of those ways that I both can escape for a little bit, but also find answers, that are harder to come across. Again, just Googling for them or asking around,
Not the same.
Yeah.
Well, I think ending on that note is kind of my favorite ending that we've had so far. So, Justin, thank you so much for coming in today. I've loved every minute of our conversation.
Thank you for having me. This was such a delight.
Okay, good. Yeah, it was a delight for me too. And thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah, honored to hear all of this.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you all for tuning into another episode of Turek Books, and happy reading out there. Thank you for listening to another episode of Turek Books. Be sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up, any kind of thing that could help us get listened to or watched by more people. We really appreciated having you and hope to see you again next week with a new guest and plenty of books. Take care until then.